reminding me to record. I knew I was going to forget that, even though I highlighted it on my page. So we'll dive into all of that in just a minute. Ben asked me to let everyone know about the upcoming retreat in May at Kirkridge Retreat Center. Hopefully, if all of you are on the email list for the Retreat Center collaboration, you should have gotten an email from Ben this morning with an invitation to that retreat. And part of that invitation was a link to fill out an interest form. I'll post that link in the chat in just a couple minutes in case you didn't see it in the email. So something to think about, an opportunity to come together with other retreat center leaders in May, which I think for those who are able to attend will be a really refreshing experience of community after being together in this format for so long. And I think that is all I have in terms of announcements for now. And so I will hand it over to Christine.
Thanks, Kirsten, and thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to, one, get to talk about the work that I do, but two, get to be just in community with all of you. And it's not often that HR gets to be in conversation with some of our partners. So double excited to be here. I'm just going to share my screen, and Kirsten, if you could let me know that it's viewable.
Yes, I can see it just fine.
Perfect. So yeah, my name is Christine and I am the HR manager at the Fetzer Institute. I've been at the Fetzer Institute for about just over 4 years, and I work within the organizational culture team. So we have a full team of people that work in HR or culture, and then with what we call our community of freedom gatherings. And so it's kind of a unique way that we have set up our HR practices to incorporate our culture. But for us, it was something that was really important and has proven to be very beneficial since coming into the COVID times. So some of the information I'm going to share with you today is just things that we've learned over the last couple of years. We've hired about 17 people since COVID started in March of 2020. And we have about 4 more planned before summer hits. And just to put that in comparison, we hired about 12 people in the previous 5 years before that. So a large increase in how many people we're bringing into the Institute, which means we really had to pay attention to what our practices were, especially going into COVID. We had to, really adapt by doing Zoom interviews and doing all of our onboarding. So I'm going to go over just some of the things that we've learned, but also we have been in conversation with some of our other partners about what their best practices were, really trying to ensure we were looking at every angle, because as most of you, I'm sure, know, hiring in these times is not an easy task. So some of these things are also what we've learned from our project partners that have shared with us. Some we've put into practice and some we plan to put into practice in the near future. So first, for us, this work really began when Fetzer realized that our org culture work and our HR work really needed to be deeply connected. And we knew right from the get-go that we really had to examine all of our HR practices, which historically for us didn't have a whole lot of structure. So really ensuring that the work that we were doing in HR really reflected the work we were doing as an organization. And one of those things clearly was our recruiting. And we really had to define our approach. So some of the things we looked at was first, we wanted to be really clear about who we are and what our values were as an organization. So for us, that includes our core values of love, trust, authenticity, and inclusion. But we also took a look at our diversity, equity, and inclusion work and our culture work and really defined those things that our HR practices needed to be grounded in. And then we ensured that the policies and practices, including all of our recruitment, our interview processes, our onboarding, were all grounded in those values. We had to review, every process that we had, everything from our starting salary, all the way, into like background checks, the interview questions we were using, how we were onboarding different individuals, and really come up with practices that reflected those values. And then communicating that commitment of our values through our recruiting, our interviews, and our onboarding. So we really communicated by making a commitment to change. So defining when and how we do background checks. So we don't just do background checks to do it, and we don't use background checks to discriminate. We also removed salary questions. So not asking candidates what they currently make, not asking them what they want to make. It just allows for less discrimination with that hiring practice. We also ensured that our interview questions really spoke to our values. So we included DEI questions, culture questions, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides. So we started from the beginning. And that was with our recruiting. We took a look at the job descriptions, and really a lot of organizations use the same job description for their job postings. And we realized this just really did not work for us. Job descriptions should really be internal only. And the reason I say that is because a lot of job descriptions have organizational specific lingo. So for us, a good example of that is we had a statement on our job description that said, serve as a part of the Institute's cabinet. Well, an external person would not know what that means. They wouldn't know what the term cabinet means. So we took a look at that and we made a change, and now it states serve as a member of Fetzer's leadership team. And so that cabinet piece was changed to leadership team, and it just allows people to really connect with the items on that job posting. The other thing is a job description really reflects a role, and sometimes it's too much detail for a candidate. So you really want to pay attention to the main requirements of a role for that job posting. So again, the job posting is that external facing piece, really a generalization of the role. Very simple. Sometimes it can be as generic as it could be used for several different organizations. It doesn't have to be really in-depth, but you want to pay attention to the things that you're really looking for and make it relatable to a candidate. A lot of times when candidates are looking for jobs, they're looking for things similar to the role that they're in. So they're going to look for those things on a job posting. So really making sure that it's clear and has all the content someone would be looking for to know exactly what a job is entails. And I'm going to go over that in just a minute, and we'll go into some more detail. The other thing that we found was we needed to realize like when we needed to use a recruiter. And I know that this is not always the best choice. You really have to look at the benefit versus the cost. So, you know, what type of role are you looking for? Are you looking for something that you need to fill very quickly? We had one recently that we were under time constraints. And so although I love hiring and I love onboarding, I'm not a recruiter. And so being able to have someone that could quickly go out and connect with candidates and pull them in, that was very beneficial for us. It's also a good idea to use it when you're recruiting nationally. Again, a lot of HR people or even, you know, operations people, those in charge of hiring, they're not skilled with recruiting and going out and finding those people that really connect with these roles. So that's another great time to use a recruiter. If you have diversity goals, which most of us do, sometimes, you know, when we're putting postings out there, we typically get people who already are following our organization. They're already connected. Maybe they're a partner, maybe they're a fan of the work, maybe they've been on retreat before. And so you're typically just going to get those people who are really following an organization where a recruiter can help pull in some diversity by looking in other areas. And then the other thing would be is if you want it to be a confidential posting, maybe you're not ready to announce it publicly or internally, that might be another good idea to use a recruiter. All right, so looking at a job description, I use this one as an example. And so this is for a sous chef that we have at the Institute currently that we're looking to hire for. And the very first thing that we have learned to put at the top of our job description is our commitment to diversity. And this really catches people's eyes because they want to know that an organization is grounded in this type of work. So just stating that the Institute is committed to equal employment opportunity and diversity, equity, inclusion, and that qualified candidates from underrepresented populations are encouraged to apply. So we actually used to put this at the bottom of our job description, and it was some advice that we received from another partner about putting it at the top, and it seems to be helping that it's just right there for a candidate to see right off the bat. The second thing is including a position summary. So this is really important, and I love it for this position specifically because we're pulling sous chefs typically from really fast-paced restaurants, hotel industry, where there's a lot of stress in those roles. And it's different for us at the Institute, and there's a lot of creativity involved in this role. And so we really want to pull in a sous chef that maybe is looking for, a change of pace. And so really being specific at the top of what we're looking for, exactly that the role assists in the preparation and service of meals, but also why this is such a great opportunity. So we included that this is a unique opportunity for a seasoned sous chef who loves their work and is ready for a role that challenges their creative abilities, but calls them to explore personal and spiritual growth. So that's really important to us to, one, make this stand out from other organizations and why they should be at Fetzer, but it also pulls in some of our culture work here that is important to us and somebody who's really committed to that spiritual growth. The other thing we found really important in the job postings is being very specific about salary and benefits. We don't really want to waste anybody's time. So if maybe it's not a full-time role, it's a part-time role. We don't want someone to apply for a position and find out it's a part-time and it not work for them. Or maybe the schedule doesn't work, or maybe the salary doesn't work. For us, in this specific role, it was also important for us to include benefit information. We do give benefits to our part-time employees, which again is not something that most organizations have. So being very specific about that can help draw in candidates when they're looking for a role, especially in a position like this, like a sous chef. So further on down the job postings, we list those key skills. And again, these are very general key skills that you would want to see in a position like this that really are relatable as well. So just a couple of examples, that planning and preparing hot and cold food, and then assisting the executive chefs. So again, being very specific, very generalized, and making it very clear exactly what we need in this role. The next one is the must-have qualifications. So a couple of things in this area. First off, don't put things like we require a master's degree if the role really doesn't need a master's degree. We've actually started pulling out any requirements for education just because it can then exclude a lot of people from a role who maybe have really great experience to bring to the table. So if it's not a necessity for the role, we suggest that you don't put that in there. A good example is we just hired a position that we normally would have requested that the person have a master's degree. However, the person we ended up hiring has like 6 certifications that are very relevant to the role. So the master's degree no longer seems like a relevant requirement. So just being very specific about that. And then the other thing is, what are your non-negotiables? So for us and for our executive chef, they really want somebody that has 5 years of service, food service experience. Somebody at this level, they feel like has enough experience that they could also slide into that executive chef role when needed, where somebody with 1 or 2 years experience may not have enough experience under their belt to be able to do that. The second thing is we really need somebody with a flexible schedule. So although we have daytime hours, we also have some evening hours, and so that flexibility. And then computer knowledge is really important for this role too, because we do have some computer systems this person would need to use. So really being specific about those qualifications. If you need it, make sure you put it in there so you're getting the candidates that have the qualifications that you're looking for. Culture is the next thing that is really important to put into your job description, especially if your culture is unique and very specific. So if you're familiar with the Fetzer Institute, we do have a very unique culture, and we call our staff to really live into that. And part of that is doing the spiritual work. So we're very intentional about putting that in a job posting. The individuals coming into a role do need to support the Institute's mission and values and work to transform themselves as well. And this is the same language we use in all job postings, regardless of what type of role it is, but another important point to put in there. And then another best practice we've actually adopted from another organization was really being specific about a timeline. If a timeline is going to be very quick, you want people to know that. You want them to make sure that they're available, that they can meet the time restraints that you might have for interviews. Likewise, if the timeline is going to be extended, so in this case, it's probably going to be a couple of weeks before we review resumes. We want people to know that because we don't want to lose candidates in the process by not being very upfront about what that timeline looks like. And then this is something that you want to just embed throughout the interview process as well, always making sure that candidates know the next step. If there's a delay in the process, making sure they know that as well. The last thing you want to do is lose great candidates, especially in this market, by them just not knowing what's happening with the role. All right. So the next thing I thought that would be helpful to talk about is resume review. So once you do get all of those candidates, kind of some best practices for looking through those to ensure you're finding diverse candidates, qualified candidates, and pulling in the right people to your interview panels. So one of the first things that I find most beneficial, and this I think it's something that is just preferred or not preferred depending on who the hiring person is, but it's something that I do prefer and I find it really important, and that is cover letters. So I always ask for cover letters, and the reason being is resumes are very bullet point, and they only have some, generalizations of what somebody's capable of. Where when you ask for a cover letter, it allows the candidate to really express who they are and what's important to them in their own words. And it really helps draw that connection to from that individual to the organization. And resumes, again, they're very bullet pointed, very generic. And to be honest, there are so many styles of resume that sometimes they lack any substance or lack any information that you really can get about a candidate. So I like to say, don't let the abundance of information or the lack of information really deter you from a great candidate. Decide on some keywords that you're looking for before you even review the resumes, and then look for those throughout the resume. Look back to the cover letter, and then in any doubt, I suggest that you actually interview someone. If you're not really sure, taking 10 minutes to either know a candidate's a good person for the candidate pool or to eliminate from the candidate pool could be very well worth your time. The review process for the resumes, another suggestion that we have taken from another organization and applied to us is, get different people to review these resumes, right? So typically we had just myself reviewing resumes. At best, we might have another HR person review them before they went to a hiring manager. And the problem with that is that, I look at them from my own perspective. So bringing in some diversity into the review process helps eliminate biases that might come up when you're reviewing resumes. It gives a different lens to look at those. So I definitely suggest having some diversity within that review process. And then the last thing that I think for resume reviews, it's been just amazing for us, it's worked really, really well, is we eliminated phone interviews. That was kind of a thing in the past, and it's something that we've learned since the Zoom times. The benefit of being on Zoom with someone, even if it's for a short period of time. So instead of phone screens, what I do now is a Zoom screen, and it has two parts to it. The first part is I review the organization as a whole. many of our candidates aren't super familiar with the Institute. So really reviewing who we are and what we do is the important first step at ensuring somebody understands what they're applying for. And then I review the role and the impact that that role has towards our mission. Once I establish that, I then ask them to tell me about their related experience and how it connects to the role. And for me, what that does is it then takes that cover letter, that resume, and it puts it into real information that I can use to decide if this person is a right fit or not. And it also allows me to see how they build connection with the role and with the organization. And usually that takes about 15 minutes. And then the next 15 minutes I use to review our culture as an organization, and then ask the candidate to reflect on what I've shared about our culture. And again, that also helps me determine if this is someone that would be, comfortable in our organization, that maybe would be a good fit and have a lot to bring to our culture. The last thing I'll say about that piece is, keep in mind that people tend to interview not for the job they're applying for, but the job they currently have. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but what I mean by that is they use the knowledge from their current role, the culture, the duties that they have, because that's what they know. So they don't yet know the organization, or at least most people won't already know the organization. So really keeping that in mind, that just because their approach doesn't currently reflect your organization doesn't mean it can't be learned, and doesn't mean that they would not be a good fit. So perfect alignment's not going to be completely possible, and every candidate's really going to have to learn about the organization and the culture and the way of working. And that's why those Zoom screens, I feel like, are really critical at the beginning stages of the review process. Some staffing challenges that come up a lot. I do a lot of work with some nonprofits and sit on some nonprofit boards outside of Fetzer, and some staffing challenges that really get talked about a lot are turnover and salary constraints. So I thought I would just touch on those briefly. For turnover, recruiting costs a lot of money, especially for smaller organizations. And when staff leave, it's significant time, it's significant cost to replacing that person. So one thing I really suggest is knowing your current staff career goals and then their personal motivators. Like, what is motivating them? Why do they love the position they're in? And where do they hope to be within the next, year, 2 years, 3 years? That can help you intervene at a time where somebody might be considering leaving the organization. And it can also help you set up succession planning. Maybe that person's a great fit for the next role in front of them, and maybe set them up for some planning in that type of way. And then when a departure is necessary, host exit interviews. So exit interviews are really beneficial to an organization because you get a chance to talk to somebody who's leaving the organization, find out why they're leaving an organization. And one of the questions I really like to ask is, what kind of advice would you give to somebody coming into your role next? And it really allows you to pay attention to those motivators for somebody in that type of role. The second thing that's always seems to be a problem, especially in the nonprofit world, is salary constraints. I recently did a project with a nonprofit that was working to hire an accountant on a nonprofit budget, which can be really tricky. And there's a lot of turnover in that role because individuals get some experience, then they find a role that's going to pay a little bit more. So the one thing I try to remind them is not all candidates are motivated by compensation. So really knowing what candidates' individual motivators were. So in that same situation, they wanted to make an offer to this accountant. And I said, let's find out what motivates her, what she's looking for, what would keep her at the organization for, let's say, 3 years. And it came down to one thing. This person wanted a flexible schedule and the ability to work from home on occasion. And so with that, we were able to hire this person at a lower salary, but with the ability to work a flexible schedule. So just, paying attention to those things that motivate individuals that can help with those salary constraints and also help with that turnover. Okay, so the next thing, just building connections. So I just wanted to touch on interviews and onboarding just a little bit. Just some key points with interviews. Number one, it's going to take time. And it's okay to take time. I know sometimes we feel like we have to rush to fill positions, especially if there's a lot of work to be done, but there can be some benefits to taking time when you're going through the interview process. For example, if you are looking for a diverse candidate pool and you don't get it on that first time around, if you don't have diversity in the candidate pool, your hire is not going to be a diverse candidate. So taking the time to really build that candidate pool into what you'd like to see within your organization. So an example of that, we have a position that's currently posted that I had to repost because our first candidate pool had all the same people. They were all honestly around the exact same age, and they were all white female. There was no diversity within the group at all. And so we extended that, reposted, and we're starting to get some more candidates to move forward with. The other thing is asking questions. So connect interview questions to your mission, your values, and your culture. And I said this earlier before, and I want to come back to it because this is really, really important. If there are things that your organization finds really important, those should be built into your interviews to ensure you're getting the right people into your organization. Again, the right people that are connected to your mission and your values might stay longer than someone else, which would help reduce that turnover. So an example that that I can just use is, our diversity, equity, and inclusion work is really embedded into everything that we do. So one of the questions that we now are asking all of our candidates is, what diversity, inclusion, and cultural competence training have you received, and how have you applied it to you learning on the job? Or you could ask, how do you engage in your own learning or development around cultural competence and relating to people with different backgrounds than you? So asking those very specific questions related to what your mission, values, and culture are can help bring in those right candidates. We also use a variety of different types of interview panels. So we always like to bring in different people within the organization, not just the hiring managers, not just the leadership, but we pull in people from across the organization. You might have a program position and there's a finance person in there and a hospitality person in there, but just somebody from different areas of the organization that this person might be interacting with. Because one, it obviously, I think we know it builds relationships right away. So there's this connection through people. When you do go to hire that candidate, they're already going to have a connection to numerous people within the organization and not just the team they're being hired into. And then lastly, for interviews, be very transparent, ensure again that the candidates understand the process, keep open communication, let them know what to expect and when to expect it. And it can keep those candidates from maybe finding another role elsewhere because they know what the process is going to be. And then onboarding is also just as critical to ensuring that, that turnover stays really low. And some of the things that we use at the Institute, first and foremost, is a buddy system. So because we do have a unique culture, we like to ensure that new hires have ongoing support. So by pairing them with a buddy, they immediately have a friend. They immediately have a resource to go to whenever they have questions. And then we also have somebody who is, ongoing doing check-ins with them to make sure, that they're acclimating to the organization and to the culture. Orientation is really important to us as well. I have every new hire meet with every single department within the organization. So not only are they being onboarded to their specific team, but they're being onboarded to every team within the organization. And by the end of the first month, they know what everyone else in the building does, at least in a general sense, and how their work is connected to each of those different departments. And then again, for the onboarding, be very clear and transparent about the process and the timeline. Some people will come into an organization and assume that they need to, take in all of this information within 30 days. That's pretty impossible when you're talking about that type of onboarding system. So just being very transparent about this, that you don't expect someone to be able to do certain things within the first week, and that, that ongoing orientation process may take 3-4 weeks before they're up to speed. And just being very clear about that. And then checking in with the individual, we do 30, 60, 90-day check-ins with HR, and then the supervisor also does coaching conversations where they able to sit down and assess how someone is acclimating to the organization, and then that buddy does check-ins as well. So I know that was a lot of information, so I just want to stop there. And then we can open it up for any questions that y'all might have for any of the topics that I covered.
Thanks so much for that, Christine. And I don't think I mentioned or pointed out specifically at the beginning that Christine and I are colleagues at the Fetzer Institute. And so it's cool to hear it like in this context, because I've been witnessing it from another side. And it's really exciting to see like how this all has evolved just in the time that I've been with the Institute. So thank you for sharing. And it looks like Cindy from La Casa has a question. So Cindy, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. When you mentioned the diverse, I'm wondering, because I'm white, and if I was applying or someone was applying for the job, is diversity also age considerate? Just not being racially, motivated to hire or culturally motivated to hire, but as an older person, such as myself, is that considered? Would you consider that part of that white thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Age should be considered. I mean, diversity in a general sense is all the differences that are being brought to the table. And sometimes that's by race and sometimes that's by gender, but it also is by age. We all have different lived experience. And so age absolutely is considered, diversity where we're looking at that diversity pool. And I'll say, each organization is going to have different diversity goals. So what you're looking for in your organization. One of the nonprofits I work with, for them, they want their staff to look just like the people that they represent, right? So then they're looking at, they are looking at race and gender, but they're also looking at age. And so I think all of those things, depending on what your diversity goals are, should be considered when you're looking at the diversity of a candidate pool.
So how do you know what they are when you get the resume? Or do you interview them? Or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. You don't know when you get a resume. And that's why sometimes this process does take time. And so that's where, being very specific, and being specific in your job or your job posting that you're looking for diversity and you're looking for underrepresented. If you're looking for something specific, putting that in there. You can't discriminate against anybody for not hitting a certain thing that you're looking for. But if that is one of your goals, you absolutely can state that. And you just have to kind of go through the process. Obviously, you won't be able to ask in an interview how old someone is, but you could get a general sense of how old somebody is based off their experiences and the things they're able to talk about within the interview. A lot of times we get people who share, that they have children or grandchildren, or they went to college in whatever year it was. So you can kind of get a general sense of that through the resume and the interview process.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Thanks so much, Christine. Really helpful. Like a lot of I found the job descriptions alone. We just finished a hiring process and it was like, wow, I wish I'd had that beforehand. I'm interested in, especially because you were talking about a sous chef, and we've talked a lot about upstairs, downstairs power dynamics, those who have full-time salary positions in an office and our casual full-time staff that are starting shortly. And I really struggle with how to give them a living, secure wage with benefits. I'm just wondering if you could speak a bit to how Fetzer has squared that. Yeah,
that's a really great question. We're actually in the middle of a pay philosophy project right now. And so we are currently looking at our pay. We have made some changes. We use what's called an ALICE report. The United Way puts out an ALICE report that basically outlines what a stability rate is. And we chose as an organization, as part of that pay philosophy, that we were going to at least meet that rate. So that's one thing that we did. We also ensured that all of our staff made at least the market rate for their position. Now, I will say that, you know, for some organizations, it's not possible to do that. And again, some of those organizations that I work with outside, it's not possible to do that. And so, you know, all of the efforts that we try to do to make sure that they're making a living wage, you know, sometimes will fall short. For some organizations, that's trying to find grant funding to replace it. For other organizations, again, it's going to what those other benefits might be that can compensate the fact that, you know, maybe you can't offer a specific salary to that group. So that might be looking at, you know, the flexibility in schedules. That might be looking at extra vacation time, different types of benefit, maybe partnering with organizations within your community, you know, the YMCA, gyms, things like that, to see if you can get some sort of benefits for maybe those staff that are on the lower end. And then, you know, examining your pay practices. We just took a look at, you know, how we do our salary increases. And something we're considering now, where we used to do a 3% salary increase for every individual. Instead of that, looking at maybe a 3% increase pool, where the money is then split evenly among staff, rather than you know, the higher paid getting more because their 3% is more. So just some things that we're looking at right now. But I think the biggest takeaway that I have found through this pay philosophy work is really involving staff, and, you know, getting those opinions from the people that are in those positions of how you can work together to ensure that, you know, they're getting some sort of living wage, whether it's, you know, financially or by benefits, that allows them to stay employed with the organization.
Thanks so much, Christine. That's helpful. 3% pool. It's great.
Christine, I had a question kind of a bit related to what Cindy was asking. You mentioned when you have a pool of applicants for a position and you don't have the diversity that you desire, what do you do differently when you repost a job to try to change that situation versus just doing the same thing and hoping you get a different outcome?
Yep, that's a great question. So it's about where we're posting that position. So, you know, we might do an initial job posting, maybe just doing, you know, Indeed, LinkedIn, social media, those type of things, where we're really pulling from people who are already following us, or who are general applicants from like Indeed or Monster or any of those kind of things. This time we've been intentional. So we're looking at different associations. Affinity Groups is a really great place, especially if you're in a larger city who has a lot of affinity groups. You could do a quick search of an affinity group in maybe some sort of the diversity that you're looking for. You could reach out to them, build those connections. I don't necessarily suggest that you just reach out and say, hey, I want to post this job with you, but really building connections with each of those affinity groups, you know, networking in the community, building the people that, you know, can help bring those people to the table for you. And so specifically for this one, we've reached out to a nonprofit organization, and I have resorted to reaching out to people on LinkedIn. So people in the area that maybe are in, you know, admin jobs, and saying, hey, we have this job posted, will you take a look at it? And then in another recent one we actually did bring in a recruiter to help us. The admin pool is very small right now in Kalamazoo. So using a recruiter that already has a pool of candidates ready to go was also helpful for us in filling one of the other positions.
I have a question. This is Margarita. Thanks, Christine, for your presentation. The question I have to do is with the buddy system that you talked about. Have you been doing that long? And what impact do you find that has? And do people are people within the organization willing and understand what being a buddy is?
I missed the first part of that question. I apologize. It froze.
I'm sorry. My question was, I was just curious about the buddy system and just to see what the impact of that has on your organization and if people really understand how to be a good buddy.
Yeah, that's a great question. So our buddy system is very tied to what we call our community of freedom gatherings, and our culture. And so buddies are on a volunteer basis. So any staff can volunteer to be a buddy, but they have to go through an orientation in order to be a buddy. So they have very specific outcomes that we want from the buddy system. And so they get orientated on how to do that, how to work with new staff. They get a schedule of, how frequently we hope that they are checking in. And when I do my 30-day interviews with all of our different new hire staff, so those 30-day check-ins, that's probably the biggest thing that comes up is just how much they appreciate having a buddy to help them. And especially right now, it was always great in the building when we were in the building, but especially critical now that we're on Zoom, having somebody to check in with and really feeling like you have this connection to an organization that, to be honest, for 17 people have never even worked in our building before, which is almost a third of our staff. And so having that connection has been, just so incredibly beneficial to the new staff that are coming in and building that connection.
Thank you.
Francisco, you have a question?
It's a comment / question, I will say. This is one of those. So for a while now, we have been talking about the possibility of increasing our collaboration in many fronts. Like I know that several of us has talk about the possibility of sharing facilitators, for example, and I am trying to make a proposal to, how we can go and share procurement process as we purchase stuff to make things cheaper for us and get better quality. So that's one, the preamble for this. Is there any room for us to dream that also we will be we can share some of the practices and the team associated to recruitment for a different retreat center? And the reason why I asked that question is because I know that we have a very weird, complicated process that has a lot of beauty within it. Our staff serve in search committee as we are onboarding new people. But right now, I have several positions open, and how many committees can people serve in? What is the support that I am having for a human resources personnel that I don't have in place? Like, we don't have consultant. It's not in our practice so far to hire consultants, but dreaming possibility. What are the things that we are willing to put on the table to say, hey, let's tackle this together as one? Any advice on that?
I love that. And to be honest, if I had the capacity for, to be in a million places at once and get to help with that hiring practice, I absolutely would. But, we depend on our partners for these kinds of conversations too. So I would just say, if you want to reach out and spend some one-on-one time, I would be happy to do that with you. If you have any, questions or you want to talk about the process that you have, I'm more than happy to do that. And I think it's a great idea to, tap into our networks and how do we share in the needs that we all have, especially maybe like organizations even nearby you, that you guys could benefit from, utilizing one resource. How are we on time, Kirsten?
We're doing pretty well, and we have a presentation from Francisco as well, and I'm kind of wondering if we should actually do that, and then we can continue the conversation with some more to work with. And I just want to add, Francisco, I appreciate your question about how the RCC can facilitate sharing resources around some of these things, because I've always been aware of the spread that we have in the different types of organizations, and some that have so many resources and some that are hanging on by the thinnest thread. And it makes me wonder how we could share resources in terms of recruitment and hiring, and also how is the RCC as a network developing the next generation to steward these, the word that comes to mind is kind of these oddball institutions, right? In terms of how we function in comparison to the status quo working world. So I think there's some real opportunity for creativity and collaboration there. And speaking of collaboration, Francisco and the team at Pendle Hill did a compensation survey. And I mentioned at the beginning, maybe some of you have participated in that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Francisco, to share what you found and some learnings from that. And then once you're ready, just toss it back to the rest of the group and we'll continue the full group conversation.
Thank you, Christine. And as you say, I have been dreaming, like, how can we expand this network and our work and to the next level, because I don't know, it will be interesting to have our financial people to have a subcommittee from the RCC just to explore issues. What are the things that they are facing and the things, and when I said, from a operation point of view, like there are so many things that we can benefit if we put our energy together. I know that Margarita, Christine, and myself were looking forward to getting together a couple months ago, and for some reason that meeting didn't happen, but I definitely look forward for what are the things that we can advance here. And as Christine said, several months ago, you hear us talking about, how can we have better information about the compensation package that we hold in our different institutions? And I talked to one member of the board that is specialized also in human resources. And I said, I belong to this network of retreat center, and I think that all of us will benefit for having some analysis of where we are in terms of our compensation. And basically, the big motivation behind this is because during the past year, after many of us started reopening, it has been so hard to recruit personnel. I have been a while with several positions that nobody is applying. So I started wondering, this is because the salary that we are offering, this is because, the job market at this particular moment, and so on. So when we were doing that, we decided to put together this compensation survey. This is what you will see when you receive this over email. It's very simple. It's in one page a snapshot of what we find here. These are all the positions that were included in this survey, from executive director to bookkeeper, passing by hospitality, associate, receptionist, housekeepers, and so on. And the numbers that you are seeing here are the average of the range that if you remember the survey, we have ranged for each of this position at these three different levels: the rate when they were hired, the current rate, and the maximum rate that we found in our different answers. Of course, this survey was sent to many retreat centers, including retreat centers that are not necessarily within our network, but that we maintain some relationship with. And we didn't receive a great number of answers. So these numbers this data that you are seeing here is based on the response of 10 retreat centers that went through the process, look at the survey, and send the data to us. Those retreat centers, when we finish with this succinct report, will receive this plus the ranges between the different columns, the different three columns that you are seeing here: the current rate, the higher rate, and the maximum rate. Now, for you to understand this picture here, and pardon me, I am colorblind, and Hannah was my colleagues in doing this color thing. I will, if I am the one putting the color, I will choose brilliant color, you know, color that I really can see. Like, I cannot distinguish here what is green from pink or whatever in this particular one. But you can see that 10 total respondents. And with these, the common things that we have is that these 10 retreat centers hold the position of executive directors. Yeah. We keep this list of positions because they were the most generic and also based on what is our own experience as we call positions. Yeah. And we try to describe each position for people to know if they have that at their retreat center or not. So, and you can see that there were, you know, other retreat center that didn't have particular position at all. So let me put this in the chat as we are having this here. That way you will have it, and we will share later the one that the Excel table that has the different data with the ranges, as I said. So the process was a very, very simple process. A Google Forms SurveyMonkey questionnaire that has each of these positions, describe them, and allow people to provide input with the specific numbers that they have for hourly pay for their employees at the different position at this different stage in their career within our organization. And as you can see, not everyone share a maximum rate. So those numbers are less reliable than the other two. However, we try to provide to that maximum rate the average based on the data that we receive. And the idea is that we can have certain conversation about this, looking at these numbers and see, you know, when we are talking that a registrar personnel earn $18, you know, at the current rate per hour, what does this mean in terms of retention, recruitment? What does this mean in terms of salary equity, and so on? So the conversation that we are looking forward to have after having this initial set of data are aligned in how can we bring a salary equity strategy to the table as we try to expand in what Christine was saying, to expand in making our workplace diverse, inclusive, and at the same time speaking to the condition that many working class people are facing today. We at Pendle Hill, for example, when we look at this, we are looking the data, and at the same time, what are the practices that we are trying to put in place as we move forward with this. For that process, I have involved my entire board, and within the board, the finance committee, and within the finance committee, there is a small ad hoc group that is working now in an improved business plan that take into consideration what is the salary equity strategy that we want to see for our organization. The big challenge that I have found in this process is that there are certain positions, let's say the director of advancement, that that particular sector is very high in pay. And for a small organization like us, sometimes we cannot cope with what the demand for the salary demands that this industry has for people that want to join us in the effort of realizing our mission, but at the same time know that they are in a stage in their professional career that this is impossible for them to work with us at the salary level that we are offering. So how we dance with that, what is equity means in that mix of things, how can we make things work at the same time that we try to respond to our needs. And as somebody that is living this the hard way, I have been looking for a director of advancement since the end of July, and the truth is I haven't had any good chance to get great candidates. I have a great, wonderful candidate that I knew because I have a good friend that was friend of that candidate by coincidence, and I knew that that candidate was also having another offer with a place that was familiar to them and so on, and with a place that I couldn't compete with the salary. So for me was a sad moment to realize that, because I knew that despite all the negotiation that I was going to put forward, like for example, can I consider a full-time 4 days a week? I don't know, why not? If I cannot pay you X amount of dollar, maybe I can negotiate the amount of time that you will be working. But at the same time, it was too late when that other person accepted the position for the organization that she was already familiar with. So again, this is a raw data based on the answer that we received from 10 retreat center, including retreat centers that not necessarily participate of this network, but that are a Quaker retreat center too. And this, instead of being perceived as a final point or a point of arrival, I think that this should be a departing point for us to engage in the exploration of how we can keep the sharing of the strategies that we can put forward for having and recruit good people for our different organizations. And at the same time that we have a good compensation package to offer to them. And I know that Cindy has her hands up. And if you have any question, we will be sending these and again, the raw materials to the 10 Retreat Center as we promised. But I think that this is an opportunity to keep diving deep into how to improve our employment scenarios.
I have a couple of questions. Thank you so much. I love data. I love looking at line items and having the reality versus fluff. I hear a lot of fluff where I come from. So I'm in California. So in that graph, there's a couple I have. One is your top salary of an average of 10 different retreat centers came to $28 an hour for a director of advancement, which is $58,000 a year, which would be 3 times that much in California. And I wanted to know, where are those 10 retreats from? Are they in a average of East, West, Canada, and Central, or where was that? Who were they?
Yeah, great question. I think that they were over the place, but most of them were in the East Coast.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that'd be great if we could do that on steroids. Just for at large, I think it would be helpful, but maybe we can do one of those on the West Coast. But like you said, some people won't share certain numbers, so it may not skew in any particular way that's necessarily helpful.
Yeah.
And
Cindy, I also want to say that I don't know if you remember, but we tried to involve these as many retreat centers as we could, saying that, hey, this is not for us to monopolize the data. This is for all of us to have a good understanding of this. And I know that this was shared twice in our e-newsletter of the Mighty Network. And I know that Ben shared this with over 300 people. Of course, 300 people can be from, let's say, 75 retreat center. If you assume that several people within the network are in the Mighty Network, but and I am being very conservative. So from 77, let's say we receive 10. So it's like how we dance, and this is not.
That's a good percentage, by the way. That's a pretty good return on investment.
What I am trying to say is, like, I do believe that there is a lot of room for improving the data that we have, and that there is a lot of room for, as we have a larger pool, we may be able to have a better analysis of the question that you were asking, how these numbers speak to the specific region that my retreat center is. Because when I compare my retreat center with other similar organizations in Philadelphia, I don't find a similar organization per se. So I need to be comparing myself with conference center that doesn't have the characteristic of a spiritual retreat center, and it's a different animal. And again, yes, the challenge of the salary is still there.
And I hear everything you're saying. I really appreciate the work you did, though, because that's a gold mine right there. And I'd love to be. I'm new to this, to coming to these meetings, so I'm talking a lot for someone who's new, I know, but it's interesting to I just want to, say what I think, and I feel like I fit in this network. This is the network that's been missing for my organization, which has been in existence for over 50 years. So, but I feel that collaboration is a really important part of our future centers. I think there is something there that we could all be, you know,
Cindy freeze.
am I still frozen?
Yeah, there you go.
You're
Okay,
unfrozen
so
now.
I don't, where did I leave off?
Well, I'm not sure we know, but
Okay.
we welcome you to the Retreat
you.
Center collaboration, Cindy, and offering us so much insight, especially the comparison from one part of the country to another part of the country is such a strong reality, especially given our great, shift of people moving in all different kinds of places at this point. If I may, I just have just a comment. One, I thought, with the survey, Francisco, just to give you some feedback, for us, it was a little hard for us to feel complete because the way that we're structured within such integrated within the mother house, that I could only do it for just a few of us, and it was just not the reality of our situation. So it was very difficult to complete it fully. So just I just wanted to give you that sense, but it was a beautiful survey, and yet there were some factors considering different setups that might have been difficult. The other thing that I found hopeful, what you were saying, Francisco, and what a question also for Christine, for your experience, that I am talking to a lot of people that negotiate their job. I don't know if I've ever would have had the courage to say, well, I'd love to, thank you for offering it, but would you consider this one day at home work, or would you consider maybe shifting the job a little bit? Or, on a personal note, and I've held many positions, I somewhat fearful of that process, just because, are they going to just say, well, you take it or leave it, here's the job? Or, are people open? Are employers now open? Fetzer, I think, is a little bit quite unique. So I just want to make sure we acknowledge that. But I see that, I hear that, that people are willing to negotiate the job description in itself. Did you find that as an experience that you've had?
Yeah, probably more so in recent years than ever before in my HR career, that women especially have been negotiating their rates, which is a beautiful thing to see. It does pose a challenge for us because we decided, as I said before, that we would pay all of our positions at the market rate. And so we really only have a small percentage of which we can negotiate with, because we're already starting at that area. And so to keep equity among the positions, that is difficult. And so, if we have the ability to do that, we will. And, sometimes you do just have to say, that you can't. I always recommend people, it doesn't hurt to negotiate a salary. So the worst case scenarios, they're going to say that they can't offer you anymore. And then you'll have to make a decision if, you're willing to accept what they're offering. But I would also say, negotiate what it is that you're actually looking for. Because like I said before, some people, it's not just the money. If you want to negotiate that to work from home one day a week, negotiate that. If you want to, negotiate, some extra vacation time, you can try to negotiate that. The worst case scenario, again, is just going to be that they say that they can't do it, but it's so worth just asking. You never know, what you're capable of getting within the role. And then as the hiring manager, you just have to, be willing to be very transparent. If somebody asks for something that you're not able to give, see maybe what the underlining need really is for that negotiation. And you might be able to have some flexibility, but if you can't, just being very clear of why you can't.
Great, thank you.
Apart from salary and kind of the quote unquote basic benefits, what are some other factors that you're able to bring to the table as alternative benefits that would appeal to other motivators aside from just the usuals of salary and benefits?
Yeah, so Fetzer really lives into the 8 dimensions of wellness. And that's everything from, the financial. So it might be money, it might be financial benefits, it might be 401k, it might be any of that, but also things like physical. So can you offer them a discounted gym membership somewhere, or could you get some gym equipment at your facility? Environmental. Do you have environmental spaces outside for your staff to, take their breaks? Do you have, trails for them to walk, which I'm sure most of you do, like those types of things. Spiritual is another dimension of wellness that we pay attention to. So really looking at all of those dimensions of wellness and what can we offer in each of those dimensions, because sometimes what fits one person doesn't fit another. So like we have a massage benefit, which I don't even think half of our staff actually use. But then we have other benefits. So we have resources, like if somebody wants to order a book for their spiritual work, they can do that, or for their professional development, they can do that. And books are kind of nice or resources such, because it's not a huge cost burden. And when you are buying things like that, our staff can keep a copy for themselves, but they could also donate it back into our library. So then you build the library that you have available for you also at your retreat center by doing things like that. But really looking at all those dimensions and how can you have an offering in each one of those dimensions that might speak to the staff, and get your staff involved in finding those 8 dimensions of wellness. Financial, physical, environmental, health, spiritual, intellectual. Yes. And now you're putting me on the spot to think of all of them.
Sorry, I like it.
I will think of them.
I can also say that in our own experience, when we think about the compensation package, as you say, team, is more than salary. It's like, how many 6 days we have in place, how many vacation days we have in place. Our employees, for example, has a 20% discount at the library here, at the bookstore here. They also, the meals, each one of us, if you are a day employees, you have 1 meal covered that you only need to pay taxes on. We also offer some overnight sojourning days for if they want to take, a break and be here, not as worker, but, just doing a silent retreat for themselves or whatever. And at the same time, everybody can sign off for our own education program if there is a space they are in, if they are interested.
Nancy, did you have a question in addition to what you posted in the chat?
Yeah, it was a little bit building off of Tim's question around other. So we had a situation, we're rural and we were hiring for a position. We thought it was going to be at a much lower level, but we got an exceptional candidate who did negotiate. And it kind of threw us, we don't have a lot of resources, we're a very small center. It threw us into kind of questioning our ED model. And I just, flattening it a little bit, because this person would bring quite a lot of leadership. And I just wondered if others have been experimenting with flatter leadership structures and with what success. I know 5 Oaks, I talked with Michael and he works 30 hours, for example. And we're desperate to learn more about how others are doing this and doing it well. Yeah, just ask that out to the group.
Hi. I'm gonna just respond to Nancy for a quick second and say that there's a lot of small nonprofits like outside of retreat centers that are really doing that extremely well. And so I would suggest you looking at some of those. And I've definitely thought about it from the perspective of how our organization needs to reorg. But yeah, I think that's those are the folks who are like who are really leading that charge.
Thanks, Octavia. And if anyone has any research publications on nonprofits, anyone to kind of direct us, we're kind of yeah, trying to collect.
And Nancy, I think that the specifics of your question relate to a more general curiosity that I've had in listening. I'm thinking about how, when there is a finite amount of resources to do the work that needs to be done, I think there can be sort of this default to scarcity, right? There's not enough dollars. There's not enough people to do the work. There's a tendency to keep the conversation about the problem solving really small, like only a certain number of people get to know the actual numbers and are the ones who are waking up at night with the problem instead of sharing it with the whole. And so I'm curious in this group if folks have experience with kind of shifting the culture of the conversation to a culture of abundance and transparency. I think one of the things that really excites me about Francisco's survey is that it's helping put numbers on the experience, as opposed to just talking abstractly about the values of equity. Looking at the numbers gives something to jump off of to have the conversation. And likewise with what Christine was sharing and what I've witnessed with Fetzer, the reliance on the Alice report to look at Michigan and hard data about what a just living wage is in our context has really kind of helped open up the conversation, because anybody can access that data and anybody can compare that to the number on their paycheck. And so I'm curious if folks have stories and experiences about moving from that sort of scarcity mindset in all kinds of ways to the abundance mindset, and how that has opened up possibilities for reimagining how we do things. And I know that's a big question with 8 minutes left, but if there are any stories that people would like to share, I would love to hear them. Yeah, Octavia.
I know how to. Sorry, I am literally in that process with this organization right now. I'm relatively new. I've started in May, and I came in with this recognizing that this was an issue at the organization and this is something we need to fix, which is a conversation around how do we operate from what we need to be a successful, sustainable operation, and then go from there, instead of what do we have and how do we make do with what we have. So I just think that for me, it's the steps of this have very much been around why is it important to operate from a space of abundance and a conversation around sustainability ultimately, and growth, and the why is a really important factor, and even the why as far as how we emotionally and physically and intellectually engage with each other when we're talking about things in that mindset versus in a scarcity mindset. So that's been a big part of my tactic, and I think it's an absolute necessary thing for all nonprofits across the sector.
One of the things we have done, we just started at a staff meeting. We have a couple of months. We have our financial manager bring a copy of our financials, our month end, and we can see in there. We can't see individual salaries, but we can see how much the organization is investing in the staff. Not only in the salary line, but also in benefits. We offer a significant benefit package and pension. And so it's all listed there. And that's really, one of the ways I want to communicate to our staff that they're valuable, but they also then have some kind of context for, oh my gosh, look at how much our organization spends on its people. Like, I think that gives us, for us, it's like 2/3 of our budget. And that's amazing. And I think people feel good when they see that and see that they're being invested in. The other thing is I've been working with our board. We're now a living wage employer in Ontario. I'm in Canada. In Ontario, we have, that's regional. And so we're just above now. We're certified as a living wage employer, which is also important. And the other thing that we did, I advocated for, and will come into play this year for the first time, is 4 weeks holidays. So instead of everybody gets, when you've been there for up to 5 years, you get 2 weeks holidays. And then after that, you get this many holidays. We have started now, if you arrive, rest and wellness is important to us. So everybody gets 4 weeks holidays. It doesn't matter whether you've been with us 1 year or 20 years, everybody gets that. And we're finding that helps. Our staff then, they feel valued. It means that they are also careful with, with our department budgets and things, because we know that, we know where all the money goes. And I think that's helping just in terms of culture and atmosphere. It's helping us to feel less like there's, oh no, we don't have enough. I think people are feeling like we're investing in them, and they're feeling valued. I think that's helping anyway. I also have a question for Christine. So I saw recently a friend of mine posted, and the Toronto Food Bank, big food bank, like major metropolis, they have started in their process to offer $75 compensation for everyone who comes to an interview. So they're doing that because they're wanting to recognize people take time, like they might take the afternoon off work, or they maybe needed an Uber to get to wherever they were, because I'm assuming they're in person. I'm just wondering, is that new? Is that everybody's doing that and I just didn't know about it? Or where is that in the hiring process out there?
Honestly, that's the first I've heard of something like that. It does make a lot of sense, especially in this hiring environment, where a lot of people are no-showing to jobs, especially into roles that maybe aren't, as high paying as somebody might want. A lot of those hourly positions, I think a lot of, manufacturing, restaurants, things like that are having a hard time finding people. So it makes a lot of sense, but that's the first time I've heard of that. But I love that idea and that approach. And I'd be super interested in to see how that has helped their hiring process and the amount of candidates they're getting in their pool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. Thanks for raising that, Christine, with a K, and for your response, Christine, with a CH. We're closing in on 3 o'clock, and I know folks have other things to move on to. And this is just another point along the way in the ongoing journey of these conversations and sharing among the Retreat Center collaboration. So I especially want to thank Christine and Francisco for being here today and presenting their wisdom and experience for the good of the whole. And thanks everyone for being here and for the work that you're doing in your own specific context to imagine how, as retreat centers, we can bring alignment between our values and our hiring practices and our employment practices. And yeah, this has been really wonderful. And I see Christine put in the chat. She's going to offer her contact information, the presentation. Ben and Christine will be putting together notes and posting them on the Retreat Center collaboration website along with the recording. And also stay tuned for the upcoming community calls on racial healing. There's 2 of them coming up, one on March 22nd and one on April 12th. And those will be 2-hour sessions each, just to have time to be able to serve the purposes of those conversations. They'll each have a little bit of a different focus, but there will be a thread running through about spiritual bypassing. So if that's something interesting to you, be sure to put those on your calendar. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day and have an opportunity to enjoy whatever the weather is wherever you are, to get outside, because the sunshine has come out here while we've been chatting. So I'm looking forward to getting out. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.